Good afternoon, and thank you for joining us. I'm Giulia D'Agnolo Vallan, and this is a Sag Harbor Cinema Conversation.
Joining us today is Mary Jane Marquesiano. She's the Director of Special Project of Cinema Tropical, who's partnering today with us on this conversation. Mary Jane.
Great. Thank you, Giulia. Founded in 2001, Cinema Tropical is a nonprofit media arts organization whose mission is to distribute, program, and promote Latin American cinema in the US. We're so pleased to be partnering on this series of directors' talks with the Sag Harbor Cinema and to have with us tonight the filmmakers Fernanda Valadez and Astrid Rondero, who are joining us from Mexico City. This talk coincides with the virtual theatrical release of their award-winning film, Identifying Features. If you haven't seen it yet, I encourage you to watch it. It is so strong and so beautiful and incredibly moving. And Fernanda and Astrid, thank you. And I want to congratulate you on your Gotham Award for Best Foreign Film. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Yes, congratulations and welcome from Mexico City, I believe. Yeah, yes. Thank you for joining us. And we are really, really happy to have your film in our virtual cinema. It's a very special movie, and I was very, very enthusiastic. You know, the moment I saw it, and then we could get this thing with Cinema Tropical it's great. It's really great. And as people are virtually walking into our conversation, I think it would be good to start from the very beginning. I believe, Fernanda, that you started thinking about this film in 2012. So I think it's a lot of, long time, a long path. And can you tell us a little bit about it? I believe that it kind of came when you went back home after being in Mexico City for a while.
Yes, at that time in Mexico, we had a surge of violence that really changed the way we felt about our country and made us realize we were and we're still experiencing a humanitarian crisis. I think at that time I wanted to shoot a documentary about the violence, the enforced disappearances, the families that made and are still making these journeys to find their missing loved ones. But I very soon realized I'm too shy, I think, to be a documentarist, and I don't feel comfortable putting real people in front of the camera and kind of exposing them, particularly because of the theme. So I began writing a short film about a mother looking for her son and a young boy being deported from the US. And at this point in time, I don't think we quite remember the order of the events that took us to that short film. It was Astrid who found a note, an account of a survivor of a kidnap of a bus. And I think that shaped the interest we had in this story. And after the short film, I felt I hadn't achieved expressing the depth of this humanitarian crisis. So I think I discussed with Astrid, because we have worked together for quite some time since we were students. And we began from scratch, rewriting and kind of trying to achieve that I couldn't with the short film.
It feels like there is one main character, but it feels like her story is the meeting point of several people's stories. How did you find the stories? How did you talk to people to let them for them to let you know what happened to their lives?
I think we can tell more about that. Well, basically when Fernanda, she just told you about the short film, and when we discussed about doing the feature film, because she felt like the short film was lacking what she was looking for, one of the things that we agree on, or the thing that really drew us upon the idea of doing the feature, was trying to broaden a little more, much more, the scope of the tragedy. Basically, that was what we were trying to do at that time. So it's very difficult to say exactly where it came from, but there's so many stories in Mexico that reflect the tragedy that we're living. So basically, I think that the reality was always getting into the story. So these stories mainly were taken from the journalists in Mexico, because they are so brave and they tell this basically everything that's happening, and they also lose their lives in that quest of finding the truth and all that. So basically we did it through the stories of the journalists. At some point we got really close to how do you say, like an association of families of people that are disappearing in Mexico. And we finally decided not to use any particular case, because we felt like it would be like very difficult to try to tell more, because they are looking for their loved ones, and they are in a journey that's very different than we were looking at that point, that we wanted to tell about the times that we're living, not a particular case. So basically we worked with journalist works through the journalist.
And basically what we did at some point was try to forget the information that we had researched, and then, well, basically make fiction and select certain events that make reference to certain real situations, but create characters, fictional characters from different social classes. That was important for us to really express that this humanitarian crisis is not exclusive of rural communities in Mexico, or migrants, but it's widespread. Yes.
I found the film very, very original in its point of view. But I wonder, was it easy to get a story of this kind financed? Because it's an unusual way to tell a border story.
It wasn't that simple, of course, to finance. At some point, we depended upon there's like financing money that we can get in Mexico through companies, like private companies, that you can, like, a tax incentive kind of financing. And it was very difficult, not because of the government, but because of them being frightened about talking about these kind of topics. So that was quite difficult. And that's the reason why we decided at some point to just go along and start the shooting, because we knew that it was going to be very difficult to get more money to finance a film. But basically that was, there's no, how do you say, like, cuando te reprimen, there is no repression.
No censorship.
No censorship.
There wasn't actual censorship from the government, but it was very difficult to convince investors to work with us. And the good thing is that we have public funds still in Mexico, and that was our main source of financing.
What was the interaction you had with the communities where you were shooting? And I imagine, like, you had a relatively small crew. Did that make it easier to be accepted and trusted with a story like this?
I think that was one of the main works we did, to work with the communities. And since I'm from Guanajuato, the town in which we shot, I think that made it easier, because we already have a net of connections, of support, friends and colleagues, and that's I think that was our point of start. From then we had to spend, like, I don't know, perhaps 6 months working with them, making them sure that we were not there to do any illegal things, because we were beginning to understand at that point that violence had infiltrated in Guanajuato. So, and that was ironic. It was good that we were a female crew, because then no one could think that we were there to invade their territory in terms of gangs or crime. But basically it was working with them and making us known. And I think that was an amazing work that Astrid and No, everybody, but you were very conscious about working with the community.
You mentioned, I'm glad you mentioned the female crew, because it's not only your co-writers, and then Fernanda directed it and co-produced, but you also have a female director of photography and a female editor and a composer. So this is not by chance, I imagine. Can you discuss this particular choice, and if it's linked to the story you're telling, as much as just the pleasure of working with people you like that happen to be women?
I think in the very beginning we thought about that because of a previous film. Astrid and I think we have always felt like we have a commitment to equality, to gender equality. We founded a production company with colleagues, female colleagues, and I think we felt that responsibility to open spaces for female filmmakers, and also because they're so talented. I think in Mexico in particular, and probably everywhere around the world, a female filmmaker has to go through more filters. So when a photographer, for example, gets into the industry, she has more endurance, more flexibility, and probably more talent than male counterparts. So that made us lucky. But I think in a previous experience, we struggled a little with gender, really. It was difficult to command and to collaborate with guys that weren't used to work with a female crew. So for this particular film, because we were going to spend so much time in Guanajuato, we were sharing rooms, and I really wanted the crew to feel cohesive and generous and happy. I thought it would be more crucial to get rid of the egos and the struggles, and so we settled for an almost completely female crew, including technicians and the below the line crew.
And I want to talk about the photography of the film. I mean, the cliche is that for a reality that's hard, you move the camera a lot. The more you move the camera, the more real it is. It's grainy, and your film looks beautiful. It's directed in an extremely elegant way, very thoughtful. You give time to the characters to open themselves to the camera and to move. It's wonderfully choreographed. Can you talk a little bit about the stylistic choices? Because that's another unusual thing in the film.
I think some of the and in the script, when Astrid and I were discussing about how much information to give the audience, how we wanted the audience to feel towards this female character, this mother looking for her son. We wanted the audience to really feel like this journey was like a jump into the unknown. So we felt it was consequent to be very selective also in terms of framing, what to put in front of the camera, what to leave outside, what you would listen. Perhaps you would listen more than you would see. And I think it began from there. And it was a very creative conversation between Astrid and myself. And then when Claudia Becerril, the cinematographer, jumped into the project, I think it was a great discussion. And Claudia, when she understood this decision we have made, she was very playful, suggesting different things, also in terms of lighting. So if I had decided not to see, for example, certain characters during the dialogues in the scenes, she felt like she could play more with darkness, with contrast, with framing. And I think it was a conversation really between the three of us. And Claudia is really, really playful, really amazing.
There is another element that ties wonderfully with the sort of dreamy quality of the film and sort of a mysterious air of it, which is not just the mystery of the missing kid, and it's you introduce the suggestion of a supernatural element, and I love that. I really do, because it kind of elevates. It makes it a little bit more universal, and it also speaks to the horror in an indirect way. Can you explain that decision? Can you elaborate on that decision?
No, yes, Fernanda's going to say that that was my idea, but it was, of course, part of the same conversation that we were having for so many months when we were writing the script. At some point, she was like stuck because she was writing the scenes of what happened in the bus, which was part of the story we read when the whole story ignited. So she was like lost because she was writing too much details, a lot of violence and gory details. And that's something that's really particular of the kind of violence that we live in Mexico due to the cartels, that it's very, very graphic violence. They overkill in some cases. So I think she was lost in that part. And when we were discussing it, I told her that I believe that it was as long as each time we got closer to the graphic violence, we were like pulling away from the human aspect of the violence. So that's why I told her that I felt that it was a better idea to go with the, how do you say, not the supernatural, like in the allegory,
metaphoric figures to express evil and violence and brutality.
Not in such an in-your-face way. And I think that when we discussed that immediately, that scene started to work much better, and Fernanda started having a lot of ideas of how to work with it. And of course, the image of the devil, I think that it talks to many cultures and many ages. So I think that's why we decided to keep it.
Yeah, and visually also, I think it was like a booster to rewrite those scenes, and I think Claudia also suggested many interesting things in terms of photography, and well, I think it was a very important moment in where the film grew.
It's a film. I'm going to open it to question to the audience, because I see a little stream here of in the chat. But this is a film about endurance and how endurance become a way of embracing life, and it sometimes is the only thing you have. Can you talk a little bit about that?
I think very, very early in the project, when we were researching and finding all these stories about horror and death and migration and disappearance, I think that one of the brightest aspects of those stories were the determination, the resilience, and the love, really, of the families of the missing ones. And I think particularly the mothers are kind of, or have become a symbol in Mexico of this bright side of violence. And it's not the bright side of violence, the bright side of life and experiences around these very difficult times in Mexico. And I think that really inspired us. And I think it became a force throughout the film, not only of motherhood, but of empathy, these nets of empathy and understanding that make it possible for these people to become detectives or activists and really changing their lives and the lives of the people around them. And well, we wanted to honor that.
A question from the audience. From Marion, I was struck by the scene in the ladies' room where she hears of what might have happened to her son. Are there real locations like this where maybe family members know to go to ask questions? Is it always so secret?
Well, that scene was inspired by an actual event in a southern state in Mexico. A family was looking for their son, and they were given in a public space small paper. They couldn't really even see the face of the person that was giving them this information, but there was a map to locate the remains of this boy. And not only the remains of this boy, but many dozens more. So I think that's something that's happening really in Mexico, because giving information can be very dangerous.
Exactly. I would say that it's not like a secret. It's more that every people that say something is in great danger for giving information.
Could you speak further to that question? Could you speak a little about how you were able to shoot in sensitive locations like the border?
Well, especially the border, we knew it how the process we had to go through, because we shot the previous film there. So we knew that they were going to give us the authorization, but it was going to take much longer than we expected. So basically what we did was to do all the process, but we went there and shoot the scene without the permit already in place. We were just waiting, and we just that was one of the great things about working with the DP, that Claudia Becerril. She's so talented, and she really thinks that a film is not made by the equipment you take. So she was carrying a very small camera, and we did it just like when you're using your camera. And we were thinking, if they take the camera, whatever, we have our all our documents saying that we're doing a film. So we did it, and we did it based with a very small crew. It was only Fernanda, Claudia, the DP, and the actor, and I was waiting on the other side of the border just with the letters and all that. So basically that scene was made that way. I must say that afterwards we received the authorization, so everything was okay. And we did that kind of scenes like with the reality, with the harsh reality. The other one was at the how do you say it, like the migrants the shelter for migrants. That was another one that was made in a documentary style. They were very helpful, and they were very eager to work in a. They thought it was going to be some kind of documentary film, and we talked to them about what was going to be, and they absolutely said yes. So basically, it was difficult in some scenes, but when we worked, the harshest scenes were done in a more traditional way, like a film. Like we closed the area, we had some police officers helping us, and we shot the most difficult scenes, like the ones with guns, because that's very, very, very difficult in Mexico. You cannot just, because it can turn into a violent event.
I think that's one of the aspects of working with the community, telling them that the guns were fake, that we weren't there to.
We had all the
invade their territory.
Yeah, we had all the support from the government from Guanajuato, which is really, when we talk about the film, it's very difficult sometimes to explain how we are sometimes the government just let us do the films, and they even support making the film, because they also want in some areas the things to change a little bit. So they helped us a lot in Guanajuato.
Yeah. I have a question from Amelia. The film has been very well received in the States. Have you had a similar feedback in Mexico?
Well, we premiered in Mexico in the Morelia Film Festival in November. So it wasn't so long ago, and we found that distributor. We were really nervous about how the Mexican audience would receive the film, because of course we want the film to find as much audience as it can, but we were really thinking of the Mexican audience when we were shooting it. And luckily for the film and for us, I think the reception was very generous, and in that festival it received different awards. But that was a festival, and we are waiting for the commercial release that we expect to take place in August to really find out how the audience in Mexico will receive it.
Do you know if it will have a wide release? I mean, do you have any idea how widely will be distributed?
Yeah, in fact, we're going to have like a theater distribution here in Mexico and Latin America, which is wonderful. We've already had a premiere in Spain, in France, in Germany. We've had many places, so now they're just kind of.
But I think you were asking about Mexico.
Yeah, I was asking about Mexico.
Mexico. Yeah, it's going to be on theaters. It's going to be on, in streaming platforms. We're hoping that it's going to be big. That's something that it's been really interesting that's happening now, that the biggest company in Mexico that exhibits films is really interested in the film. So we are signing with them. So it's like a great news for us.
And I think it also will depend on COVID, if the theatrical release, how can it take place and in how many theaters.
I have a question from Mary. I think you're very brave. Do you see yourself as brave?
I think not really, because to be honest, I don't think we perceived any danger while making the film. Well,
in Guanajuato
I did more, and I think I was more conscious about that.
Which was good, because she needed to focus on doing the scenes. It wasn't so dangerous. Perhaps we had a lot of luck because of the people who was taking care of us in the community. And I would say that that's the biggest achievements that we had, and we learned so much from it, which is working with the community. That was key for the film in many levels. And one of the levels, of course, was safety. They helped us, they were with us, they were taking care of us. So basically but it was dangerous at some point, even though you didn't notice a lot. But I wouldn't say that we were like, how do you say it, like brave? Probably we were more innocent than brave.
And speaking of the community, I think some of the actors come from the community. Was it it's a combination of professional actors and non-actors?
Yes, I had worked with Mercedes Hernandez, the protagonist, and David Illescas, the actor that plays Miguel, in the short film, and they both professional actors living in Mexico City. The rest of the cast are non-professional, and we found them, particularly the young guys, the young men, the teenagers, enrolled school near Guanajuato. That was a wonderful experience, because both of them have experience about migration, particularly the boy playing Rigo right now is in the United States in a very complicated situation. When we cast him, he told us about how difficult it was to cross the border, how he almost died crossing, and then he was sent back. I think that was an emotion and an experience they put into the film.
From a question from David. Without spoiling the ending for those who have not gotten to see yet, did you always have that ending in mind for Magdalena, or did anyone ever try to make you consider a different or more positive outcome?
No, probably not.
No, I think it was one of the earliest intuitions we had, even from the short film. I think in that ending, we wanted to express like our point of view regarding violence in Mexico, because we really don't think that all of a sudden our young men have become mass murderers. I think social injustice, inequality, poverty, the lack of opportunities are, it's like a blender in which violence is born. And I think that reflection is in that ending. So we pretty much we stopped to that ending from the very beginning.
And to this point, now that you're just opened the film in the United States with this great reception, what are the biggest misconceptions that you're encountering as you discuss your film in terms of the perception of what the situation is at the border?
I think people have been really, really generous towards the film.
But I think perhaps in written comments, in Twitter, what we have been able to see is that migration is a really sensitive issue in the United States. It is also for Mexico, but we see it from a different perspective. People want to migrate because they want to look for a better, safer life. And in the United States, it's sensitive because it implies breaking the law, and it implies, I think, a relationship to otherness, to people different, perhaps from the regular citizen in the United States. I think we've encountered that discussion, but I think without us wanting to really tackle that discussion, for many people, it has made them feel like migrants have powerful motives.
From Edgardo Gutierrez, thank you for this extraordinary work. How was your impression when you watched the film for the first time?
Well, that's a very interesting question, but at the same time, it's a little bit tricky because we never get to see it for the first time. We're always watching it as it develops, especially the way Fernanda and I work, that we're in every part of the process. When you're writing it, when you're shooting it, when you're making the first cut, when you're doing the rest of the cuts, so it's very difficult to watch it for the first time. But probably when we felt like we were watching it in terms of with audience, perhaps that was the moment which was more hard for both of us. Yeah. We watched it in a work in progress in San Sebastián, and it's like a very important market for Latin American films. And it's like basically the people there are sales agents, and they're thinking in many things, and they're working a lot. So they're basically using their phones and going in and going out and doing things like that. And I made the terrible mistake of sitting Fernanda and myself, of course, near the entrance. So we were watching everybody who was just going away. And I think that at some point we were just like devastated. It was a very, very difficult experience.
It's difficult. It is. I think we both felt like this is a mess. No one's going to watch this film, because I think almost 50% of the people in that theater went away, left. But
we shared the same experience. Yes. Like we shook hands at that point, and we said, well, there's something that it's powerful, even though if they don't like it. So when the lights turned on, everything, it was just like it was a bad experience, but at the end everything went okay, and that turned out to be like a key moment for the film. Yes.
I have a question from Jane. The story is horrific, but somehow it is good to look at the real damage the cartel has done in Mexico to the families, the mothers. Here in the United States, we see films like that almost glorify the cartel violence. Were you intentionally responding to any of these films?
It's a difficult question. I don't think we were responding to those films, but we did want to tell the story in a very human perspective, to tell an emotional journey, particularly of the victims. And I don't think Astrid or myself feel like there's a way to glorify violence. I think violence in any form generates more violence, and that's what it does.
So, but that's true. There's a culture that's glorifying.
Yes.
But yeah, but I would say that no, we weren't doing that consciously. At least I think we were coming from what we are experiencing as Mexicans, that we are always watching these type of stories in reality, in the news. So we really feel for the families, and we really believe that their journeys are so inspiring that that's probably the main idea we have throughout the film.
I found it very interesting, and I'm changing for a minute, that you are not only making your own films, but you are also producing other filmmakers' films. And I'm kind of wondering if you can give us an idea of how connected young Mexican filmmakers are. How alive is, you know, the interaction between young artists that work in film in Mexico?
Well, we feel, especially in these times with COVID and the things that are happening with the funds in Mexico, because there's been a terrible cut in funds. We feel like we are very close to each other. We are a very strong community, and we feel like there's been a lot of things that happened in previous years. We don't know exactly why that made that the voices of Mexican cinema are more plural. So I think that's why our generation feels really inspired of working together, because it's very contradictory to have this broken country and being able to tell our stories and make films and grow with films, and
we really do have a very strong film community. That's true.
I was thinking, is there any of this new generation of Mexican filmmakers that you find of inspiration? You know, by looking at your film and its visual beauty and care, I was thinking even Carlos Reigadas, you know, although his films are on different subjects, but the attention to sound, to light, to the landscape, I found it very very unique.
Well, I think there's like an industry part to that we have for the past 20 years in Mexico have a significant investment in public education for filmmakers, in film funds. So I think all the films that have been released in the recent years are a result of that, and that's what we're trying to defend right now in Mexico, that people like us who don't come from families of artists or wealthy families, we can decide to go into film school, a public film school that are in between the 20 best schools in the world, and actually be able to shoot films, because there are ways and you can become a part of that community. I think that has been wonderful. We have been losing that for the past couple of years, and the community in Mexico are all trying to defend that.
And I have a question from Anna. This film reminds me a lot. So Edgardo Gutierrez. Anna is above. I'll get to her later. This film reminds me a lot about Juan Rulfo and the journey of Juan Preciado. Is there a relationship between Mexican literature and this film?
Well, I think at a certain point you are not conscious of the influence you have. I think most people in Mexico have read Juan Rulfo. He was not one of our references, but definitely his literature, his two main books have influenced and have made a big impact in culture in Mexico. And I do think that his books, I like El Llano en Llamas particularly, are kind of metaphors of a country trying to evolve into something that, and we never get there really. But I don't think we were thinking about that when we were writing.
And from Anna, I love the line, we all look the same from behind. What prompted you to have Mikael say that?
Well, I think that's something we were thinking about when we were writing, and we were settling for a title early on also in the process. I'm going to tell a story about that. Astrid wrote a synopsis even before we have a complete draft of the script. And when she was describing a scene that we had talked about, the scene in which the two mothers look at the pictures of dead bodies, and she wrote something like, The photographs correspond to almost any Mexican under 30 years old, dark-skinned, round face, medium height, but their mothers could tell their sons apart immediately. Something like that. Your writing was more gracious than I do. But I think that was the idea, that violence makes us anonymous. And it's the love of our close people that take us from that, from being anonymous and give us a face and a story.
And we have a message from Gabriel Vasquez. Congratulations on this excellent film. You have portrayed border violence like no other Mexican film. When I watched the devil depiction, I stood up and gave it an ovation. It's really a moving film.
Oh, thank you. Thank you so much.
Yeah. And this is almost over our time. And I want to leave our audience with one last question from me. And it's, I hear you have a new film already. And what can you tell us about it?
Well, we're financing, and it's been a long journey, especially now with the situation and that's everywhere. So it's just, you're very good telling how it matches the story, but in another way.
Well, I think because we have shot 2 films, one directed by Astrid and one directed by me, and this will be our 3rd production. And I think with each film, we are trying to tackle questions that we couldn't tackle in a previous film, and that in a strange way, they're inspired by that. And I think while we were still writing Identifying Features, we were kind of wondering, how will it be possible for young people to escape violence? Because in Identifying Features, we were thinking, what conditions are necessary for a young man to commit acts of brutality? So this new film addresses that hope for this generation of young men. So it tells the story of an orphan of a gunman, of a cartel gunman, from age 5 to age 17. And I think it's a reflection about the real inheritance from a violent father to a young boy, and the inheritance we're trying to explore. It's not really violence, but the hope for a better life.
Well, I want to thank you very much for being here with us today and for having made this beautiful film. And we look very much forward to the next one, and especially because it feels like a continuation of your poetic process and your thought. So thank you, Fernanda. Thank you, Astrid. And for who has not watched it yet, Identifying Feature is beautiful, and it's in our virtual cinema. Please take a look at the film. Thanks.
Thank you so much.
Bye.